Mamushi can change the future, or perhaps the most accurate way to describe this is that Mamushi can actually break Jippo. Yeah, that's the opening or title for this topic, which I think is very interesting and certainly quite controversial. I'm Nim without the E. At least for the next 8 minutes, we'll focus on discussing something special. And of course, it's only about Mamushi and not about chapter 28. Yeah, that's just how it is. And speaking of the future, or something that is certainly very closely related to fate, in this case, at least only a singularity of fate, has a crucial role in determining and directing the most ideal future. And of course, to become a singularity of fate, honestly, I think it's too complex. It's not very specific who or how, but at least we've talked about this before. I mean, a few weeks ago, we found some evidence, and I admit it, although it's not 100% absolute, surely every character who has karma like Boruto, Kawaki, or Code can change the future and make it branch out. But in Boruto's case, he has far more privilege. In other words, besides being a pure vessel for momoshiki, and momoshiki having the ability to see the future, Boruto is also Kashin Koji's right-hand man. So indirectly, he is also a character capable of creating a branching future. Because once again, besides being Momoshiki's vessel and having karma like Kawaki and Code, this also creates the belief that they can change the future. But if you want to know more details, you can check out this video. But anyway, at this point, we know that besides Kashin Koji, who has the ability to see the future or fate and steer it toward a more ideal direction, the big question mark for this topic is Mamushi. And honestly, I didn't suspect anything about this at first. I mean, maybe it was just a coincidence. But after thinking about it repeatedly, I think it makes sense. And of course, it all started when Boruto destroyed the future that Kashin Koji had determined by going to the battlefield to save his friends and fight against Jura. In short, even though the end result was quite a relief, with Mogi and Shinki returning and several other ninjas returning to their respective villages and surviving, including Boruto himself. Even this sense of relief is something Eida definitely feels as well, since it also applies to Kawaki. Yeah, I don't need to explain this case in detail, because as we all know, Eida loves Kawaki, and the reason she stays in Konoha is, of course, because of him. Regardless of any assumptions or speculations suggesting that Eida might also be interested in Boruto, the point is, with both Kawaki and Boruto safe and returning to Konoha, that alone is enough to make Eida feel relieved and at ease. However, this is where a new, far more terrifying problem begins, namely, Mamushi's movements. And once again, regardless of how much worse the future looks for Eida or Himawari, just like you've seen in the chapter 28 spoilers, let's set that aside for a moment. So yeah, continuing with Mamushi's movements, what makes this topic point to abilities that aren't directly explained could be a clue that Mamushi can change the future. And that's in the recent dialogue between Shikamaru and Kashin Koji. I mean, there's something we're not aware of, or perhaps it's more accurate to say that there's something wrong with Kashin Koji's prediction. And it all started with the unexpected fact that Mamushi moved earlier than Kashin Koji had thought would happen in a few weeks. But in fact, Kashin Koji himself did not expect it to be earlier and faster. And at this point, have you ever wondered and thought about what and why? Isn't it true that what Jippo sees can only be distracted by karma users like Boruto, Kawaki, or even Code, as I mentioned earlier? But anyway, after I looked into it more deeply, especially regarding the anomaly where Mamushi's movements were not as Kashin Koji saw them, do you think that Kashin Koji's prediction being wrong is a common occurrence? I mean, is this just a coincidence? And we also know that, at least for now, only Eida, Boruto, and Kashin Koji are singularities of fate. But what about Mamushi? Is he also part of a singularity of fate? Or does he also have karma that can distract or divert the future seen by Koji? Of course not, and that's ridiculous, right? Because we know that he is just a Shinju from the manifestation of a lab assistant named Bug, and literally, as well as in terms of his background, he is not really that special. Unlike Sasuke or some other Shinju who are definitely shinobi, right? But the point is, with the fact that his movements were beyond their expectations, the conclusion remains that Mamushi is not a singularity of fate that can divert and such. So how could he change the fate that Kashin Koji initially saw coming to Konoha Village in the next week, changing it to come earlier? Yeah, I know this is minor, but can we consider this something we need to talk about? With confirmation that we know the Mamushi's movements are beyond Kashin Koji's predictions, I think this indirectly means he has changed the future. But how? And what is the reason? But again, Do you agree that Kashin Koji's confirmation that the Mamushi's movements are much faster than he thought means that he has indirectly changed the future? I think you agree. And to answer this case, there are two answers. Whether it sounds ridiculous or not, I think it still makes sense. But again, this all has something to do with Otsutsuki or karma. In other words, one of Mamushi's abilities, which is similar to Otsutsuki's, can indirectly change the future. But it should be noted that I am not saying that Mamushi is an Otsutsuki. On the other hand, when it comes to chakra marks, there is something else that is quite interesting. For example, we know that Boruto and Kawaki, who are obviously Otsutsuki, also have the ability to remove chakra marks. But even with that fact, each of them still has a hidden ability to detect each other, even though they have erased their chakra marks. In other words, it's like a bond. And the question is, even though Mamushi can erase chakra marks, can Boruto and Kawaki still detect him within a certain distance? What do you think? But if we return to this case, it's certainly not just Mamushi's ability to erase his chakra mark that allows him to move earlier and faster than Kashin Koji sees. First, the chakra mark couldn't be detected. Second, there's an internal factor. It's purely a weakness of Kashin Koji himself caused by Boruto. And of course, in that dialogue, Boruto concludes something. If Kashin Koji can see a better future, why doesn't he tell everyone, right? And as we know, Kashin Koji explains that it's not that simple. Even if everyone knew their future, it would actually make the future even more branching and difficult to predict. We also know that even though Shikamaru is currently on Kashin Koji's side as his right-hand man, Kashin Koji doesn't give reasons or ask questions. Instead, Kashin Koji wants Shikamaru to do what he orders for the sake of the future itself. So, in conclusion, aside from Mamushi's ability to erase his chakra mark and make Kashin Koji unaware that Mamushi was moving much earlier and faster than predicted, another supporting factor is Boruto. Yes, you heard that right. The more Boruto moves and creates other scenarios that even Kashin Koji is unaware of, the more unpredictable and difficult to predict it will be. But if I may ask, what do you think is the most crucial factor in determining why Mamushi was able to move much earlier than Kashin Koji had predicted? Or was it just a coincidence? I don't think so. So let's discuss it in the comments. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the review for Boruto Chapter 28.